Texas is the fastest growing state in America. 500,000 new residents pour in every year. The Texas Triangle, the bright corridor connecting Dallas, Houston, Austin, and San Antonio, lights up satellite images like a constellation of ambition. Companies are relocating. Magazine covers celebrate the Texas miracle. And if you believe the headlines, this is the future of America. Young, fertile, booming. But here's what nobody's talking about. Since 2011, Texas has been below replacement fertility. In 152 of 254 counties, more people are dying than being born. The only reason the state isn't shrinking is migration. And that migration is draining the one resource Texas is already running out of water. If you're curious how geography and demographics shape which places thrive and which ones fade, subscribe. Because what's happening in Texas isn't just a Texas story, it's a preview of what's coming for much of the country. The myth that built an empire, Texas is supposed to be young. That's the story everyone tells. A state full of big families, cheap land, and opportunity that attracts 20-somethings from every corner of America. And for a long time, that story was true. But the numbers have been telling a different story for 14 years now, and almost no one noticed. Since 2011, Texas has been below replacement fertility. The magic number is 2.1 births per woman. That is what it takes for a population to sustain itself without immigration. Texas is at 1.84 births per woman. To put that in perspective, Texas now has a lower fertility rate than Finland, a country famous for its aging population and generous parental leave policies designed to encourage more births. In 152 out of 254 Texas counties, more people are dying each year than being born. That's 60% of the state in natural population decline. The state only appears young because of migration. People move in from California, from the Midwest, from abroad. They bring their energy, their talent, their tax dollars. Strip that migration away, and Texas is already shrinking. This matters because the entire Texas growth model depends on one assumption: that people will keep coming. The roads, the schools, the water systems, the healthcare infrastructure, all of it is built on the expectation of perpetual growth. Every bond issue, every highway expansion, every new suburb platted on former cotton fields, they all assume the next wave of arrivals is right behind this one. But what happens when the supply of newcomers slows down? What happens when California stops sending refugees from high housing costs, or when the Midwest runs out of young people looking for warmer weather? The growth machine does not have a reverse gear. It either keeps expanding or it starts breaking. The dependency trap nobody planned for. When fertility collapses, the population does not just stop growing, it starts tilting. And that tilt creates problems no amount of corporate relocation can fix. The fastest growing demographic in Texas is not tech workers or young families. It is people over 65. By 2060, nearly 1 in 4 Texans will be 65 or older. The dependency ratio has already hit 51.6, meaning there are 52 dependents, both elderly and children, for every 100 working age adults. Fewer workers are funding more retirees. Healthcare demand is spiking while the state faces a shortage of up to 60,000 nurses by 2032. Think about what that ratio means in practice. Every 2 workers have to support one person who is not working. That is Social Security, that is Medicare, that is pensions, that is long-term care. And as the ratio tips further, the burden on each worker grows heavier. Taxes rise, services get cut, or both. 88% of Texas counties are already classified as health professional shortage areas. 71 counties have no hospital at all. Rural clinics are closing because they cannot attract doctors willing to live in towns that are slowly emptying out. A nurse in Houston can make twice what she would earn in a Panhandle town with half the cost of living. So why stay? The tax base is compressing at exactly the moment when costs are exploding. The people who need the most services are concentrated in the places with the fewest resources to provide them. This is bad, but the demographic crisis is only the first-time bomb. The second is worse, and it is underground. The water that took 6 million years to make. Beneath the Texas Panhandle lies something almost impossible to comprehend. Water that is ancient, older than human civilization. The Ogallala Aquifer was filled by glacial melt during the Pleistocene epoch. Some hydrologists estimate it took 6 million years to accumulate. 6 million years. That is longer than humans have existed as a species. This vast underground reservoir stretches beneath 8 states, from South Dakota to the Texas Panhandle. But nowhere is it more critical or more threatened than in Texas. Since 1900, farmers have drained 89 trillion gallons from the Ogalala. That is roughly 2/3 of Lake Erie, pumped out in just over a century. And they are extracting it 6 times faster than it can naturally recharge. Do the math. If you are drawing down 6 times faster than nature can refill, you are not farming. You are mining. This is not like a lake that fills back up when it rains. The Ogalala sits beneath layers of rock and clay that block most rainfall from ever reaching it. What is down there is fossil water, ancient, irreplaceable, and running out. Once it is gone, it is gone. There is no technology that can refill an aquifer on human timescales. No amount of conservation can put 6 million years of glacial melt back underground. The Panhandle's agricultural economy was built on this water. The cotton, the corn, the cattle feedlots, all of it depends on irrigation from wells that are dropping year after year. Center pivot irrigation systems sweep across fields in giant circles, each one pumping hundreds of gallons per minute from a reservoir that took an ice age to fill. The 20-year countdown. According to a 2025 analysis from the University of Texas, 70% of the Texas Panhandle section of the Ogalala could become unusable within 20 years. Not depleted entirely, unusable. The water level drops so low that pumping becomes economically impossible, or the remaining water becomes too mineral heavy for irrigation. In Palmer County, aquifer levels dropped 1.3 feet in a single dry season. Lake Meredith, once the Panhandle's primary surface water source, has shrunk so dramatically that it now gets 75% of its supply from groundwater pumping rather than lake inflow. They are pumping underground water into a lake because the lake cannot fill itself anymore. The mayor of Boyd, a small town in Wise County, issued a blunt warning. If drilling continues at current rates, wells will start going dry by 2040, 15 years from now. That is not your grandchildren's problem, that is yours. The Panhandle is draining. But what about the cities? Surely the metros are insulated from rural water problems? Stage 5. In May 2025, something happened in Central Texas that had not happened in 32 years. The Edwards Aquifer Authority declared Stage 5 drought restrictions, the most severe level in their emergency framework. This was not a warning. This was not preparation. This was emergency action. The J17 index well, which monitors aquifer levels near San Antonio, measured 624.7 feet. The crisis threshold is 625 feet. They crossed the line by inches. 2 million people across San Antonio and the Hill Country were told to cut water use by 44%, nearly half. Car washes shut down, landscape irrigation was banned, golf courses went brown, restaurants stopped automatically serving water, swimming pools could not be refilled. The last time the Edwards dropped this low was June 1990, before 3 decades of accelerating climate change and explosive population growth added millions of new straws to the same shrinking reservoir. San Antonio built its entire identity around this aquifer. It is the largest city in the United States that depends primarily on a single underground water source. And in May 2025, that source nearly ran dry. But here's the twist that makes Texas water so terrifying. When the rain becomes the enemy. Just weeks after Stage 5 restrictions took effect, Central Texas experienced a 1,000-year rainfall event. In early July 2025, storms dumped catastrophic amounts of water across the Hill Country. More than 100 people died. Dozens went missing. At Camp Gilmont near Kerrville, campers were swept away by flash floods. When reporters asked why evacuation orders never came, officials had no clear answer. This is the paradox that defines Texas water now. A state that spent months rationing every drop was suddenly drowning in it. The drought from 2021 to 2025 was the longest and most severe on record for much of the state. 4 years of relentless heat baked the soil until it lost the ability to absorb moisture. The ground became almost hydrophobic, water repellent. When rain finally arrived, it had nowhere to go. It ran off in sheets, turning dry creek beds into rivers and turning rivers into walls of debris carrying trees, cars, and anything else in their path. The same land that was too dry to grow crops became too hard to absorb a storm. The infrastructure built for a different climate could not handle either extreme, not the drought and not the flood. Reservoirs that should have captured the runoff were already designed for a weather pattern that no longer exists. And here is where all three crises, demographics, groundwater, and climate, start feeding into each other. The vicious cycle. As water becomes scarcer, agricultural productivity collapses. Farms that depended on Ogallala irrigation either switch to dryland farming, which yields far less, or shut down entirely. A cotton farm that produced 800 pounds per acre with irrigation might get 200 pounds without it. At some point, the math stops working. As farms fail, rural counties empty out even faster. Young people leave because there is nothing left to inherit. The family farm that sustained 3 generations becomes a liability rather than an asset. Sell the land, move to Dallas, find a job in logistics or healthcare. That is the rational choice, and millions have made it. As rural populations shrink, tax bases compress, schools consolidate, first 2 districts merge, then 3. The local hospital, if there is one, struggles to keep its doors open. When the nearest emergency room is an hour away, every heart attack becomes a death sentence. Every car accident becomes a funeral. Healthcare workers follow the jobs to cities, which makes rural care even worse. The elderly who need the most care are left in places with the fewest resources to provide it. The dependency ratio that looked bad at the state level looks catastrophic in individual counties where the median age is pushing 60. Meanwhile, the Texas Triangle metros, Dallas, Houston, Austin, and San Antonio are absorbing everyone. Nearly 2/3 of all Texans now live within this triangle, and it consumes 2/3 of the state's water supply. The very migration that is supposed to save Texas is accelerating the depletion that threatens it. Every new subdivision in the suburbs, every new tech campus, every new Amazon fulfillment center, all of it requires water that has to come from somewhere. Over the past decade, 143 Texas counties lost population. Agricultural losses from water scarcity are projected to hit $50 billion over the next 10 years. And the cities keep growing, keep building, keep pumping. What $154 billion buys, Texas officials now estimate the state needs $154 billion in new water infrastructure by 2070. That's nearly double what they projected just 3 years earlier, when the estimate was $77 billion. The numbers keep climbing because the problem keeps getting worse. Without that investment, projections show a shortage of 7 million acre-feet during severe drought. That's enough water to supply 1/4 of the state's population. Economic damages could reach $150 billion. Groundwater levels are projected to decline 32% by 2070. Total water supply could drop 18% by 2060. And here is the problem buried inside the problem. Texas's entire fiscal model assumes endless migration of young workers to fund these investments. The taxes, the bonds, the growth projections, all of it depends on people continuing to arrive. But where do those workers come from when every developed nation on Earth is aging simultaneously? When California is aging, when the Midwest is aging, when even Mexico's fertility rate has collapsed? Texas is betting its future on a migration pattern that may not exist in 30 years. Staring into the abyss. Gabriel Collins, an environmental law professor at Rice University, says Texas is staring into the abyss. But he adds a caveat worth hearing. The state isn't helpless, it is more like someone standing at the edge of a cliff with a half-built jetpack beside them. The parts are there, the technology exists, someone just has to finish assembling it. Solutions exist. El Paso and San Antonio are piloting aquifer recharge projects, pumping treated water back underground during wet years to rebuild reserves. Desalination technology can turn brackish groundwater into usable supply. Water reuse systems are already working in other parts of the world. The question isn't whether Texas can solve this. The question is whether a state built on growth at all costs can admit the growth has limits. Whether it can spend $154 billion on pipes and pumps and treatment plants, infrastructure nobody sees, instead of highways and stadiums and convention centers that make for better ribbon-cutting ceremonies. The jetpack exists. Someone has to build it. 2 Texases stand in the Texas Triangle at night. Dallas, Houston, Austin, San Antonio, the lights blind you. Construction cranes silhouette against the skyline. Tech campuses sprawl across former ranch land. Suburban developments push outward in every direction, mile after mile of new rooftops. This is the Texas everyone sees. The Texas on magazine covers. Now drive 4 hours northwest to the Panhandle. Watch the corn get shorter every year as the water table drops. Watch wells that once gushed now struggle to fill a stock tank. Watch farmers sell cattle because there is no water left to grow feed. One farmer described what is happening to his land. Year after year, he and his father watched their corn get shorter. They had to overwater just to keep it alive, but the Ogallala Aquifer was depleting so fast that even the water quality was degrading. The minerals concentrated as the levels dropped. The soil turned salty and sick. He said the ground does not feel like earth anymore. It feels like a brick. 2 Texases, one visible and one invisible, one booming and one draining. The question is not whether they will collide. It is when and who is still paying attention when they do.